The next attribute that's really guiding and driving us is incentivization. So both monetarily for the skill set, great competition with the private sector, as you would imagine, for this type of skill set, and making sure that we harness every authority and every cent that we have to incentivize the workforce. Next critical piece of this is training. We've got to have the right training pipeline and the right resources centered around training to go, again, from what the services provide, which is that baseline operational capability, and then bringing it to what we desire for every member is the mastery. We've then got to make sure that we can retain this force. This is where we look at models like Special Operations Command, where across the service components, there's a career path where we can retain the best and the highly trained ones that have, again, ideally gained mastery or working towards mastery. We can repeatedly keep them in a rotation and an assignment here at Cyber Command. And also, much like special operations, we're developing and executing specialized mission sets. That requires specialized training, and again, the ability to incentivize and retain that talent. And then finally, we're looking at, it's not just the cyber operator, but it's also the enablers. It's the headquarters element and the support pieces that come with that. That's part of the force presentation model from the services, and that's what we're getting after. Chairman, the most, I think one of the biggest challenges is really just figuring out how do we attract the right people and incentivize them to want to have a career in cyber force.
And just brief, you can't do this on the cheap, can you, General?
Chairman, we certainly can't.
Thank you very much. Senator Reed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Bradley and Mr. Anderson, you have some of the same issues, and you've been working at it before as Secretary Sutton and General Rudd, of creating a service secretary-like position. And since you've been both confirmed, what have you done to sort of accomplish that mission of getting you into the service secretary-like mode, and maybe what advice you have for our CyberCom friends?
Hey, Senator, first and foremost, Honorable Sutton and I speak regularly about this topic. I can assure you of that. But I want to thank the committee specifically on the 907 authorities that you gave us in the NDAA that allowed us to be a service-like entity. Since taking the seat, we've had a few initiatives, but just to highlight a few, Senator, we've been investing more in our personnel, having that advocacy for the budget, specifically being in the room with our service secretaries, to make sure we're doing things in an efficient manner and it's the best dollar going for the taxpayer. Administratively, Admiral Bradley and I have done a sprint, as you might call it, where we have taken our staffs to look at where there might be efficiencies made, so we don't have duplicate efforts, both from the SOLIC enterprise as well as from the SOCOM enterprise. Ideally, we come out with the General Order 1, similar to what the Army and other services do, where it lays out the roles and the responsibilities for us as a service like in SOLIC, and then obviously SOCOM and Admiral Bradley. So it's been a great initiative that we've been pushing forward. And it's quite honestly made our staffs talk and be more open in dialogue in how we do things. So I'd be remiss not to mention I think one of how we've organized ourselves specifically in SOLIC to mirror something like what the services have, where we have a capabilities and development, we have an M&RA, and we have a special operations analytical arm as well. So it's a lot of work, but we're moving headstrong forward with it.
Admiral?
Yes, Ranking Member. First, I'd start foundationally. We inside the uniform aspects of SOCOM recognize the constitutional foundation of civilian control of the uniformed service. It's a critical facet of our constitutional democracy, and we are fully supportive of manifesting it inside our formations as well. Very pragmatically as well, as SOCOM recognizes that the next challenges we face will be solved through a tighter integration with our service teammates. We have to also have that service connection at the secretariat level. And so inside the Pentagon, it's very important for a robust, empowered SOLIC to be able to be in the same meetings and to have the same interactions to complement what we are doing on the uniform side. And the sprint and the interactions that our staff are having to both find places where horizontal integration is appropriate, that is teaming to divide labor and be better, but also appropriately where vertically oversight functions need to exist, both of those are critical aspects that are coming out of this sprint.
Thank you very much. General Rudd, we've talked a lot about CyberCom. Can you tell us what you believe your 3 top challenges are at NSA?
And sorry, Ranking Member, at NSA?
Yes. I'm sorry. That's my Rhode Island accent. Forgive me.
All right. No, thanks, Ranking Member. It kind of goes back to the operating principles against which I conveyed both to the committee in my opening statement, but also to the force is we have to move at the pace of the strategic environment in which driven really in large part by the pace of technology. So the ability to be able to harness technology ahead of an adversary, to be at the foremost front and retain and maintain that advantage is really what's critical. The next piece is the ability to scale. We've got to take our efforts, again, to move fast, figure out where does it apply, not only across other parts of NSA, but across Cybercom, but then, of course, across the entirety of the joint force. And then driven by innovation, moving creatively to solve the hardest problems. We may not always have the scale and mass that we would desire, but we know that we can creatively outthink anybody. And then finally, it's integration. We want to make sure that we are nested with, again, not only across the 2 commands to be complementary, that delivers that speed, but then in support of the joint force, but also in support of interagency where required.
Well, I have 14 seconds left, so I can just salute Secretary Sutton. I think you're going to do an excellent job. And one of the issues, the question I was going to ask, we'll send you a written question.
Time's up.
The center, thank you. The center of gravity for your AI efforts in the Cybercom realm, and also I think in special ops. I think that's the question we'll send in writing, but it's important. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Bradley, how are you working and assessing SOCOM if it's appropriately postured for the Indo-Pacific?
Senator, thank you. First, we look at it across the spectrum of conflict. Competition, crisis, and should crisis cascade into conflict, how are we positioned to be able to support the combatant commander, my good friend Admiral Sam Paparo? How are we prepared to integrate with the services and the service components there in the Indo-PACOM AOR? And at a competition level, how are we able to provide value to our allies and partners to strengthen the resilience of our alliances there? And we believe that that is